This is a short recording looking at The Ruin of Kasch by Roberto Calasso, and we're continuing with his discussion on the origins of the modern West. And I'm reading pages 55 to 56, and the heading of those pages is The Mysterious Strength of Legitimacy. So on page 55, he says, "The captivating story of Western metamorphosis involves a whole series of theological insurrections. How after the priest Melchizedek, auctoritas and potestas become separate, how they are allied and how they clash, how one is subordinated to the other, how they exchange homages, how they are nourished and restrained by each other in relation to the many gods of the cosmos, or to a single extra-cosmic god, how earth and heaven are divided, how finally auctoritas is absorbed into potestas, while injecting into it the spiritual venom that will henceforth render it demonic. All this is primarily a sequence of theological glosses. The mechanics who perfected, oiled, and set in motion the bulky modern machine were theologians." So that is a very categorical statement and very interesting when we imagine that the modern secular West has been built actually by secularists or people who rejected any kind of theology, people who had a quite different way of thinking from the pre-modern way of thinking. But instead, Calasso is saying that those that really initiated modernity were the theologians. And he continues, "After completing these tasks, they discreetly withdrew. All that remained was to initiate the least interesting aspect, the shift to action, a series of revolutions. All modern artificialism, which is by far the most efficient device for affecting the world and developing power, finds the seal of its tortuous journey not in some secular empiricist, but in Calvin." And another interesting point which deserves a lot more contemplation is this statement he makes, "All modern artificialism, which is by far the most efficient device for affecting the world." I'm not sure if many of you noticed how our culture today really is a kind of artificial construction. We're walking around in an artificial culture, and even the way that our personalities are being cultivated is by artifice, artificial media, or let's say images and ideas and propaganda that is glorifying artifice. So it's interesting, he says that this is the most efficient device for affecting the world. And then to continue, he says, according to Louis Dumont's definition, this artificialism is the systematic application of an extrinsic imposed value on the things of this world. The act of operating on the world with such finely honed knives must originate in something outside of the world, and it is precisely Calvin who finds that element in the will, insofar as it has the power of arbitrary decision derived from God, who is the archetype of the will. Something which is not of this world and soon will choose to forget that this is its origin, is set in the centre of the world and shakes it, claws it, searches it. So the human will, which was bestowed upon the human being by God according to a theological understanding, this human will is not of the world, and it acts upon the world. He says the most devastating effects of such a will are destined to be felt when nobody remembers that the origin of its power is outside the world, because what is not of this world will no longer be mentioned. What is not of this world will no longer be mentioned. And again, this is very much the culture that we have today. Anything that is outside of what we can see and hear and pick up with our five senses, anything outside of that is not really considered, not really seen, not explored. So something that acts upon the world from the outside, so to speak, no one really will even consider where this force or where this power is coming from. It's just kind of accepted as a given. People will have to submit to it without acknowledging it, as he says. From theology, we pass to a sort of black magic whose source cannot be discovered, for it is in solestibus, it is in heaven, or again outside the world, it is in the spiritual realms. Thus, in all his convulsions, in his claims to autonomy, in his imperious and groping gestures, what we call the modern individual in the world has within himself, hidden in his inner constitution, an unperceived but essential element which is not of this world. Yet everything happens as if that dazzling crystal, that almond wedged in the psyche, did not exist. Graecum est non legitur. It is Greek, therefore it cannot be read. But the language that is not read is the language that acts. So he uses this quote, individual in the world, almost as a kind of reference to Heidegger being in the world, and to Sartre as well. And again, the way that our thinking is shaped today, we exist, we act without seeing where the origin of that act is. And this entity, which is the will, this unseen entity, is not understood. So when it brings about an action in the world, people accept the action as a given without querying where this action originates. And then Calasso moves on to the subject of monarchy again, which is a big topic in this book. And he says Talleyrand's ancestral line goes back to the legendary Aldebert. Around the year 1000, he supposedly made the following retort. Hugh Capet asked him, "Who made you a count?" And Aldebert replied, "Who made you a king?" A premature reference to the singular intimacy Talleyrand always enjoyed with the Arcana Imperii. The most dangerous point for any sovereignty is its origin. And that's today's reading. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to comment underneath, and looking forward to going through the next one. Thank you for listening.